Hello, welcome in everyone. My name is Ceci Sparrow. I am a light-skinned Black woman. I'm wearing a red shirt today with my locks pulled up on top of my head, glasses, and a fabulous red lip. I want to welcome you in to our program this evening. We are going to be having a family talk. But first, I want to remember to give you my pronouns. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the social media manager here at the Frontline. The Frontline is a Black woman-led joint project of the Working Families Party, the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project, United We Dream, and the Rising Majority. I want to also let you know that we have ASL interpretation available on screen throughout the program today. And if you want closed captions, please use the CC button in your video player. So why are we here? What are we doing tonight? Well, we're going to be having a family talk about what's going on with the ongoing COVID pandemic. The winter holiday season is once again upon us. And the Frontline felt like it was time for us to revisit some cautions that we need to take to keep ourselves and our communities safe. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our guests this evening. We have Dr. Yancey and Lash Nolan. Welcome, everyone.
Well, thank you. Good evening. Hello.
Good to see you. Let's start with Lash. Please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is LaShira Nolan, but everyone calls me Lash. And today I am wearing a brown jacket with some colorful dangling earrings. I'm a Black woman, and I have like a Afro Mohawk thing going on. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm a fourth year MD and Master's in Public Policy student at Harvard Medical School and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And I'm also the founder and executive director of We Got Us, a youth-led organization that was started in 2020 to provide resources to marginalized communities around COVID-19. And now we've continued to do that work for almost 2 years. And really looking forward to our conversation to making sure that we share the information that we've gathered with our community.
Welcome. Dr. Yancey, please tell us about yourself.
Well, sure. My name's Eric Yancey, and I am a Black guy who's balding. He's got a mixed salt and pepper beard, who's been practicing. I'm not going to give my size because I have had a few too many donuts through the years, but I've been practicing pediatrics in the city of Indianapolis, urban area of Indianapolis, for the last 43 years. Also recently published a fiction novel about what happens during a pandemic. So it's a love story about two African-American scientists during that time, and had a lot of fun with that. And just here to see if I can share any other information I may have that we've gotten through the years concerning this pandemic.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Yancey, is it true that you performed the national anthem at the NCAA in Indianapolis this year?
This was actually a year or so ago. Yes, I was for the finals game, did that, and it's kind of been spreading since that time. So I was a few more people have called me since then. So I thought they were joking when it first, but yep, I did.
Fantastic. Well, welcome in.
You.
So the first topic we want to cover is what's the latest on what's going on with COVID in the news. Every day, it seems like there's continuing developing information, and there's a lot of confusion. Just this morning on MSNBC, they were talking about how difficult it is to find Tylenol and cold medicine. And I'd like to get you guys' comments on that. Let's start with you, Lash.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what's happening now is very emblematic of what this entire pandemic has been, where we're just like, what are we supposed to be doing right now? I know for a fact that a lot of us are outside. It seems like all of the events and things that used to be shut down are now allowing us to come in. At one point, we had to show proof of vaccination, but it seems a lot of those policies have kind of been thrown out the window. And I think that we're seeing the consequences of a lot of those decisions that were made in the past couple of months, where we say, okay, theoretically, we're acting as if the pandemic is over, but now we're seeing this combination of COVID-19 variants. On top of that, it's flu season. On top of that, it's RSV season. So we're having this mix of all these viruses that we tend to see usually in the winter months, but it's further complicated by the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of policymakers and leaders have been trying to get us out of the pandemic, but have left some folks behind in that process. So I think that while we are outside, COVID-19 is definitely still outside too. So I think that that is the biggest update that I've seen from my perspective, is we're having like this kind of this mixture of all these things that we often deal with on a normal basis, but also the worsening impacts of COVID-19 as well. And Dr. Yancey, I'm curious to know if that's also what you're experiencing with your patients too.
Yes, in fact, there's a lot of folks that feel like, okay, well, the pandemic's over, so we're just done with this, and we call it pandemic fatigue, and a lot of people do experience that, and I certainly understand it. You've been inside in a whole bit, you just want to kind of get your life back, and that has led to a number of certainly adolescents with anxiety and depression and things like that from being isolated in a whole bit. So I fully understand that, but unfortunately, it's not over. Although we do have probably now, and there's some estimates of somewhere between 85 and 90% of people have at least some degree of an immunity to it, either from natural infection or from immunizations. And so that's a good thing. So we're not getting as desperately ill in the numbers that we were, and the death rate is certainly going down. But we still have cases coming all the time. Now, one thing that kind of gets left out is that from 2019 to now, we've got a whole new crop of individuals who weren't even born then, okay, when it started. So they can't possibly have immunity to it because they weren't born during the time. So there's no immunization that they got because they weren't eligible for it. So they're still vulnerable and exposed to it. So I think what we have to keep in mind that we have vulnerable, 1 and 2 year olds who are still capable of getting a serious infection with this. And so I think that once we keep that in mind, that kind of has to push us toward doing things that are going to be safer. And of course, you mentioned the word mask and you're stoned, and we still require them here in the office because as was mentioned earlier, that the triple threat is still out there. Okay. And then this winter is going to be, so we're still got the RSV, the flu, and the whole bit. So here in the office, if you come in, you got to have a mask on for right now. And so that's one of the areas that we take. Certainly leaving your children home when they're sick, from daycares and schools. We have to get alternative childcare because, a lot of the breeding ground for this is going to continue to be the places where people congregate. And of course, daycares have been a vat of infectious diseases for a lot of years. They're necessary, but they still cause problems. So there's some things we still can do. And I don't want to take about that, but I do want to say that the one thing that overwhelmingly we keep trying to push is that one of the best ways to actually to try to get rid of all this is with the immunization. You got to get a shot. You got to get a shot. And so I think that if we can do some of those things, that's going to help to drive those numbers down and keep children safe.
Thank you so much for that. And yes, we do need to really lean into being realistic about these stories that keep popping up. Like this is an ongoing issue. It looks like it's definitely going to be here. It's here now. It's been here. It's year 3, and it will be here moving forward. And we definitely don't want to become complacent. However, what do you see as the biggest threat to what we need to protect ourselves from going into the holiday season, where us being outside is one thing, but being together with you mentioned babies, but our other vulnerable family members during the holiday celebrations? Go ahead, Lash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I'll say is that there are a lot of folks who have hidden disabilities or challenges with their health that we might not even know about. Mm-hmm. And one perfect example is that this semester, one of my classmates fell ill with a new illness where she was immunocompromised. And a lot of us weren't initially aware, and there weren't a lot of policies necessarily around masking. But then we all made the decision once we found out about this illness to make sure that the entire class was masking. And I think that that is the kind of energy that we need to come into our communal spaces with, because there's one thing for there to be a policy or for there to be statements that are made, but at the end of the day, this pandemic and our continuing struggles with it, it's all about us. Like, we got to really look out and care for one another and realize that masking works. And then on top of that, the vaccines also work. And something that we could really do going into the holiday season is making sure that we get that bivalent COVID-19 booster, which unfortunately hasn't gotten as much attention, or a lot of people haven't necessarily heard of it or gotten it. But I think that that is something that we could do to, put an extra amount of armor around us as we go into the holiday season. And also acknowledging the fact that some of our family members may have gotten COVID earlier on and might be experiencing long COVID as well. So also make sure that we're being cognizant of how that might also be impacting the way that they're presenting in these spaces. But I feel like at the end of the day, it's all about community. It's all about us looking out for one another and making sure that we're just aware of how everybody is coming to a space.
Thank you. Dr. Yancey?
Yeah, I love the fact that your class got together and decided to mask to keep one person safe. Okay, so we're going to be, horribly inconvenienced, but to keep one person safe. And I think that's the kind of mentality that has to be adopted on a much broader scale. What are we going to do? Fine, I'm not immune compromised, but what am I going to do to keep you safe? And I think that we have to look at that because when that doesn't occur, then we have problems far beyond COVID. But the other thing I want to say is that from the immunization standpoint, vaccination standpoint, we will never find any intervention, any medicine, any vaccine, any kind of surgical procedure, anything that has absolutely, positively zero risk. Okay, that doesn't exist. Okay, I had a glass of orange juice this morning. Okay, so as far as I know, it could have been contaminated. Okay, it wasn't. They took all the precautions, but I wanted my orange juice, so I drank my orange juice this morning. So I can't say, well, you know what, 20 years ago, there was a contaminant in there, so I can't drink this orange juice now. Okay, so what we're looking at is something that doesn't exist, and that is a completely zero risk phenomenon. There's no intervention like that. Acetaminophen is not zero risk. Ibuprofen is not zero risk. Cough syrup is not zero risk. Okay, but on the other hand, the benefit of these so far out, exceeds, any kind of risk that we really do have to say, okay, look, the scientists have looked at this. Scientists that look like me, scientists that don't look like me have looked at this and said, hey, this is safe. We need to actually get our community immunized. Every now and then somebody may have a side effect, but if we have, and the vast majority of side effects are extremely mild and reversible. So yeah, you may get a sore arm. You may get a little bit of sometimes a little, you feeling like you kind of caught a little bug or something, but that's far, far better than actually coming down with the wild strain of the illness. So keep in mind that everything we do, walking on the street, has at least some risk to it, but you have to look at benefit versus risk. And we've got to get some shots. We've got to get better immunized. We've got to get protected, because this particular virus didn't hit the children as hard as it did like the older people. Okay, but on the other hand, how do we know the next one won't actually focus on the children? Viruses are very smart. They adapt to what they want to do. The next one could be really hard on kids, and that means we're going to have to accept getting our kids protected and vaccinated, and realizing that those who studied it have no bone to pick with trying to hurt us. We need to get this done.
Yes, absolutely. And in keeping with the quote, I'm always reminded that able-bodied is temporary. At any point, any of us can be disabled, whether it be temporarily or, life-changing. So yes, we do have to come together and protect each other. Speaking of which, our most vulnerable, well, the ones in my house, kids. I mean, even before COVID, they were little germ magnets, always bringing something in the house. But the thing that's really concerning that I've been hearing a lot about, especially this year, are our children and families that not only get COVID once, but they're getting repeat COVID. And as that relates to, you guys mentioned long COVID, how does that affect, or is there some relation to that with the rising strep cases? We have strep in my house right now, along with RSV. Are they related?
Yeah, well, RSV has always been out there. Every year we see cases of RSV. Okay, and so this year there's been a lot of focus on it because there seems to be a whole bunch of cases and a lot of children who are very sick with it. But it's always been out there. So and of course, Lash can kind of help me on this one. I'm not sure. I have not read about any type of causation, cause of related to that. However, if more children are going in complaining of these respiratory symptoms, and you say, oh, by the way, I have a sore throat as well, then you're going to get tested for it. Okay, so, and by testing for it, you're going to actually find more cases of strep because you're now testing for it. So if you increase the number of respiratory illnesses that actually cause the visit to the physician's office, you're going to go through a number of tests. Strep will be one of those, and you'll probably see an increased incidence because we're actually testing more respiratory illnesses.
Yeah, I think it's definitely some of that for sure, because I mean, you can think about the same way where right now it may seem that COVID cases might not be as high as they were last winter, but could it be that now we have so many resources where we can just take a test at home and isolate at home, so it's not being monitored by the public health department or commission as closely as it was previously? And I think right now we're privy to, if you have any symptom, the first thing you're like, okay, I just hope I don't have COVID. So let me go to the doctor, let me get all the tests. And just as Dr. Yancey said, you might be getting tested for strep more frequently. So I think that that's definitely what could potentially be driving the trends that we're seeing as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so bottom line, what is your best advice for those of us who want to keep being outside and celebrating the holidays and mixing and mingling with family we haven't seen in a year for the winter season? Dr. Yancey?
Sure. Well, now, you know me, I'm always going to say the best advice is to get vaccinated. I mean, there's no substitute for that. Have your own protection so that, your exposure, many times your exposure, you can't necessarily minimize. You walk past someone on the street, you sit next to someone on an airplane or whatever, you don't know who's got what. So you want to put your own coat on. You want to go ahead and get the vaccination. It's safe. They've been, most of the side effects we see with serious side effects with any type of vaccination are going to occur in the first 6 months of that. It's now been out longer than 6 months. We're not seeing any, your eyelashes are not falling off from the COVID vaccine. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these shots. That's the first one. The second one, if you are ill and know that you're ill, you're going to have to go ahead and give up that communal party this time, and you're going to catch them next year. Because if you're sick and you're sick, you just got to stay home.
Yes. And there's no lizard tails. I think there was a rumor that you got the vaccine, there would be a lizard tail or some nonsense going on.
I hadn't heard that one, but I'm not surprised. Okay. I'm not surprised.
Lash, what's your best advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've all decided is that we got to continue to take care of one another. And I think that no matter what might be happening politically, no matter what other people might be doing, it's important to, as Dr. Yancey said, think about the decision of getting the vaccine. And also, how do I protect my community and the people around me right now? So even if the government or whoever might not be saying, you better be wearing a mask at all times, just thinking about spaces that you might be more at risk in. And also understanding that I've heard a lot of people say, well, I already had COVID one time, like my antibodies are good. And that's not necessarily the way it works, right? Like your antibodies might be good for some time, but then that wanes. And there's also been data that has shown that if you get repeat cases of COVID, you're more likely to get long COVID, and you're also more likely to have more severe manifestations from COVID-19. So this means, heart, lungs, all of that, and even a greater likelihood of being hospitalized. So the threat is definitely still out there, and we got to continue to do whatever we can to protect ourselves. And that means masking when we're around big groups, making sure that we have some windows open. We try to keep those gatherings outside as much as possible. and just making sure that we're looking out for our loved ones as much as we can.
And if I can just throw something in, if I got 2 seconds, and that is that if you do get a viral illness or your child gets a viral illness, don't overtreat. Okay. Number one, that these are viruses, and that is self-limiting. They're going to limit themselves. Your immune system is, hopefully going to kick in and take care of that. But the amoxicillin is not going to help that. Okay. The other antibiotics are not going to help that. So don't push, scream, and yell for antibiotics in these situations, because over a long period of time, you're going to just change the normal bacterial content of your body, and that can be problematic of itself. The other thing is there's been a number of studies looking at cough syrups and things like that. And in a word, they kind of don't work. Okay, so you want to keep the fluids going. Low grade fevers have never been a problem so far as brain damage or anything like that. So children are going to get these. They're not going to be destructive to them. Don't sleep with your child in those instances, because number one, you're just going to drive the temperatures higher. So sit right there by the bed and comfort them, but don't sleep with them. So we're going to see if we can avoid over treatment, because the vast majority of these, certainly we want to prevent the infections anyway, but viral infections tend to be self-limiting. If your child can eat and is not having trouble breathing and things like that, they're probably going to bounce back pretty well. On the other hand, if your child stops eating, is having trouble breathing, you got to get into somewhere to be seen, because more treatment may be necessary at that point.
Thank you so much. Okay, so just to review, when I was young, my mom used to hit me with the Vicks and the Robitussin. So maybe ease up off of the Robitussin. We can keep the Vicks going, right? That's pretty safe.
Vicks is fine. There was actually a study that looked at the children tended to feel better with a little bit of Vicks. And I was shocked to see it, but there's a study that looked at that. And yes, it seemed to be good. And over age 4, even a teaspoon of honey at bedtime tended to soothe things and actually decrease the cough. And it worked as well as one of the major components, dextromethorphan. So the honey was safer and worked as well as in fact, a slight bit better in that study than dextromethorphan did, which can be a little bit of a sedative.
Okay, so I'm going to make a list. Vicks, a little bit of honey, get boosted and get vaxxed up. This year, I definitely did get my flu shot along with my COVID booster. So that's good to know as well. Lash, do you have anything to add to that? So I got 4 on my list.
No, I think that is it. I think that is it. And just listening to your body and taking that time to rest. I think it's so hard for us to just take a step back and rest. But as Dr. Yancey said, the body is working against all of this, but we got to give it all the support that we can by making sure that we're well rested, well hydrated, and all the things that our grandmama and everybody always tells us to do is to take a step back. So absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. Where can we find you guys and follow your work?
Lash, go right ahead.
Okay. So you can find me on Twitter at Lash Nolan. I know that that's like always up in the air these days, but I'm also on Instagram at Lash Nolan _official. So please follow me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, LashiraNolan.com, or you can email me, and I'll be happy to connect with you.
I am technologically challenged, so I have a Facebook page, Eric A. Yancey, MD, where I actually talk about various topics, from sleep deprivation to viruses to immunizations to everything. But I don't have, I'm not really on Twitter or Instagram. Well, I have an Instagram account, I still do much with it. But you can find me on Facebook, Eric A. Yancey, MD.
Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing your time and giving us these nuggets of information today. You can also follow the Frontline on Twitter. We're still on Twitter at We Join Frontline, and we are on Facebook and Instagram at We Join the Frontline. We hope to see you guys again. Enjoy your holiday season, and thanks. Good night.
My pleasure. Pleasure being with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.